Hey everybody, it's your old pal Eddie Stevens here from Whittier, California, and this is the video that everybody's been waiting on. This is the video where I'm going to compare and contrast in the same video the three models of Sires that I have collected over the last couple of years. A lot of you have seen my other videos, and thanks for all the comments and questions. I try to respond as soon as possible. I give practical reviews, as you've heard in my other videos. So I'm going to compare the Sire V7, the M7, and the P7, and I'm doing that in the order that I received it, which is also the order that they came out. Cool. So I will go over the preamp one more time, just in case nobody's ever seen my videos, and it's the same preamp on every base, so we don't have to do this on every base. You got a stack pot here, which is volume and master tone. The master tone works in active and in passive mode, so it's good for both. Next one is your pickup blend. Towards the neck, towards the bridge, in the middle, however you like. That's active and passive. So that goes on no matter what. This is your active preamp. This is the only when the preamp is engaged. It's treble. Mid with sweeper, that I believe is 2K on the high end, 200 on the low end. And bass or bottom, whatever. The toggle switch, I don't know if you can really see that, is here. Going down on this bass is active, up is passive, okay? On the back, two separate battery compartments, one for each 9 volt. It is an 18 volt preamp. That's the same in every base. These are the holes in the back, so you can go string through body if you like, which I do, or you can just go through the bridge. This is the ash maple version of the V7. I'll talk about the woods as we go through, but I have found that I like the ash better. Okay, so this is just straight up flat. I'm running it through a Gens-Benz Shuttle 9.0, and my Schroeder cabin is 1210 regular, which is a 12 front loaded, a 10 angled, and a horn. Okay, so I'm just gonna play a little bit. This is EQ flat in the bass, master tone all the way out, both pickups on, volume all the way out, active. Here we go. Straight up finger, nothing special. The slap end on it, it's a jazz bass. This is what they're supposed to do, and it's a Marcus Miller's. What else do you want? I'm not a huge slapper all the time, but I'll give you this something. Cool, so that's active. I'm gonna go passive just to show you. Cool thing about the Sire basses, at least that I've noticed, or not noticed in this case, no major volume difference from active to passive. So many basses, including another one that I own from another company, when you go active to passive, your volume drops. And then you're like, oh man, you have to gain up your amp or whatever you have to do to get back to where you were. That's so annoying. Sire did a great job of trying to even out the volumes. So here's just straight passive, tone all the way up, both pickups up, but no active preamp. So, not as, let's say, brilliant or hi-fi, but it's still a good, solid sounding jazz bass, which makes me feel more comfortable as a player. If the batteries die in the bass, which I try not to it never happen, but it does happen. Or if, you know, typical 60 cycle hum, if there's some dirty power in the house, and no matter what you do, it's just buzzing like crazy. One of the easiest things to do is flip to passive, and most of the time it'll get it away, or at least most of it. So I like that you can do either or. I'll do a slight treble and bass boost, just barely past the indentation. These active preamps are very sensitive. I've mentioned that in other videos, so please be careful, because you're gonna kill people if you don't, okay? I don't know if the phone was really picking that up for you, but big difference. Okay, I don't want to waste a bunch of time in each race because I want this video to go cool. So I'm gonna mute my input so I don't pop my amp. Love mute switches on amps. And next, I'm gonna go to this pretty little thing. This is the M7, and this is the Alder Rosewood. It's the only one from them that I have in Alder Rosewood. It's cool. I just much rather prefer the Ash Maple, as I have found through doing everything that I do with these bases. This is a cool base, much lighter than the V7. The V7 is quite the boat anchor. So if you don't like weight on your shoulder, I don't mind it, but if you don't like it, V7 may, at least the Ash one, may not be the way to go. Okay? So this base has the same preamp, has the active passive toggle. Oh, sorry about that. There you go. But this is what sets the M7 apart. Not only does it have humbucker pickups, but it has these coil taps. And if you go back to my M7 review video, I go over this in detail, including what each toggle does. And I'll put the link in the bottom for you guys so you can go over it, because that's the confusing part about this bass. The V7 is the perfect plug and play bass. Just go, see you later, here it is. The M7 gives you ridiculous amount of tonalities, but you really have to sit down and work at it to get it going. And finding your sound and then maybe your secondary sound. So this is my sound, which is active, you know, EQ is flat, everything is straight up like before, but I have the taps with the one for the bridge pickup up, which I believe, if I remember correctly, makes it go single coil, and the other one is just in the middle, which is a series, I believe. I had to go back to my video because there was so much to remember, but here it is. Way different sound, and you're thinking, man, it's the same preamp, same General Woods, how is it so different? Well, it's obviously you're gonna have this flame maple top, which is a nice huge thick piece of wood, flame maple on top, which makes a big difference. But those coil taps, I'm gonna go both single coil. When it goes single coil, I'll reiterate, it does the outer coils, so you can kind of get that vintage bass kind of sound, that 70s vintage. Okay, I will also mention this feels smaller in my hands, like with spacing, lengthwise. I had to go back and confirm. I don't remember if it's 35 or 34, but it just feels smaller. So if you're looking for a bass that's super playable for smaller hands, or you just don't want to spread out as much, like some guys do, this is going to be the better bass for you with that. I'm going to go back. I'm going to go down both, and now be careful on this. I flip both toggles down, and it's going to make it go, I believe, both parallel. Now that added a whole bunch of body that can get to be too much if people aren't expecting it. Something that I would mention that could be a possibility for is to use that as maybe like a solo boost without having to use pedals for that, because you can get really down and dirty and fat with that if you're doing a finger solo. If you're doing a slap solo, obviously you're going to cut through regardless, but if you're doing a finger solo at any point, flip them both down, you're going to get that little extra beef and boost that you might be looking for. I'm back to my normal setting. I'm going to go passive. Actually, I'm going to bypass. The coil tabs do work both in active and passive. That's really cool. This is passive. Little Michael Jackson, you know. Still clear, still fat, but just I think a little tighter in passive. I'm gonna go back to active. I'm gonna do what I did in the last bass. Slight treble boost, slight bass boost, just like that much, okay? find that's kind of like the cooler sounding of this bass. But again, so much you can do with this, guys. This is a bass you will have to sit down and work with. There's no getting around it. You're gonna have to figure out what your favorite coil taps are, positioning, EQing, all that fun stuff. So if you've got time, a tonal monster. Okay? I'm gonna mute this, and now I'm gonna go to the most recent addition to the family. The PJ. Now, I will say on a personal standpoint, any PJ I've ever tried, that I've ever wanted, was always $1,500, $2,000, and as a working bass player, the way we, put our real, like, you're working all the time, traveling all the time, you don't want to always spend $2,000 on a bass, especially if you don't have to, because, we've all heard horror stories with the airlines. If they drop it, they break it, you're kind of assed out. Excuse my French. But that's the beauty of Sire, to make it affordable. Okay, so I am back, unmuted. This is going to be an ash maple, because I decided I like that better. Preamp is the same. Toggles here though, so instead of like that way or that way, it's more like the M7 where it's up is active, down is passive. Okay, cool things about this PJ bass. The weight is kind of, I would say, the perfect weight. It's in between the heaviness of the V7, so it's lighter than that, but it's heavier than the M7. I feel like the M7, I feel like I'm playing a feather. I don't feel like I'm really playing a bass. The P7 is the perfect weight. It sits properly on my shoulder and where it lays. Just perfect weight. Also, obviously, being a PJ, at any given time with your pickup blend, you can make this a P bass. So it's not just a PJ, it's a P bass. And for me, I'm gonna break the mold here. I've never owned a straight up P bass. Now I kind of do. So I'm gonna play everything straight up like I always do. Everything's flat, in active mode, both pickups. Here's a little something, something. I did use these on a few gigs last weekend, so they might not be as bright as it would be with new strings. But I also found that this tone of the PJ, just like other PJs I've tried in the past, seems to really sit right where it needs to be. I'm also a sound engineer for a living, live, not studio, I don't do studio, but live concerts. So the bass is always the X factor. Are you going to get a good sound out of the bass, or is it just going to be mud down the bottom end? Drums you can manipulate easily. Guitar is guitar. Vocal is vocal. But the bass is, the bass is the one where you really got to really work to get a clear sound. And I feel like this one just sits right where it needs to be. And all the sound guys that I've asked about all my basses, they all love the sounds. That's cool. But I found with the PJ the most, the sound guys will leave the channel flat because it's just right where it needs to be. So right now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do that cool thing where I'm gonna solo out just the P pick. I'm gonna push the blend all the way towards the neck. This is just a P bass now. Now I'm gonna go passive because I find I like this P actually more in the passive sound. I don't know why, I just do. You're just gonna get that more old school, just meat and potatoes P bass sound that you heard with James Jamerson, Bob Babbitt, all the greats. It just works out really well. And I have noticed, and I will make a mention of this, on this bass itself, if I'm really digging in, especially on a solo, but if I'm just digging in hard and my hand is above the P area, I do notice it gets dirty. Kind of not too distorted, but it just gets a little grimy, dirty. So be careful of that. If you don't like that at all, be careful. If you don't mind it because it's your artistic, side of things, then this is great. Jazz pickup, solo it out. Straight Jocko all day, and that was passive. I'm gonna go back up to active. I'm gonna do what I did on the other basses: slight treble boost, slight bass boost. That much. actually made it sound so sweet. I'm gonna solo the P pickup with that same EQ setting, slight treble, slight bass boost. I love that sound, Sire. You killed it with this P pickup. I can't stress that enough. Guys, there's no reason to change the pickups in any of these basses, but certainly this P pickup, even with having a few gigs of my grime on this bass and just slight EQing, is one of the best P pickups I've ever heard. I hope you're listening to this video with earphones, because that's the only way you're gonna hear these differences. But this P pickup is to die for, ladies and gentlemen. Other than that, great basses. Okay, so now I play through the V7, the M7, and the P7. You're gonna all wanna know, what's my favorite? Which one works the best? It's impossible to choose. And I know it's gonna sound kind of cliche-ish. I'm gonna tell you why. I've mentioned this before, the V7 is the perfect plug and play bass. It's just go, turn it up, here it is. It's amazing. The M7, the tonality differences you can achieve with this bass with those coil taps is beyond ridiculous in a bass that's only $700-800. I can't stress that enough, but it's gonna take you time to dial it in. If you have the time, or you're cool with that, awesome. It's a great bass. If you're just, man, I don't want to deal with that, probably not for you, but a great bass overall. And the P7, this is the perfect weight. This is the perfect tone to cut through in almost all my mixes, whether I'm playing finger or, God forbid, with a pick if the gig requires. It can be a P bass at any given moment, so you're getting really two basses for the price of one, if you can imagine that. A P bass and a PJ. Guys, it's totally legit. I just love the way this one sits, the way it feels in my hands. They did put a jazz neck on this bass. I've heard a lot of guys, old schoolers, complaining, oh, God forbid they put a jazz neck on a P bass. This is not a P bass, guys. This is a PJ. So it could have gone either way. I do remember when they were designing this, Sire took the time to ask on Facebook in the forums, what type of a neck would you prefer? And I do remember it was a vast majority of jazz neck. It's a lot more comfortable to play. Especially for someone like me who's never owned a P bass. I've played a P bass, but I've never owned it, so my hand is not accustomed to that. My hand is accustomed to jazz necks, so that allowed this to be the perfect, just put it on and let's go. Okay, if it would have been a P bass neck, it would have just taken a little transitioning for me or any other player like that. It doesn't normally play that. So please don't get mad at Sire that they didn't put a P neck on this. That's all three basses, guys. I just saw a video of the V9 the other day. I'd like to order one of those soon. The vintage V7 sounds great as well, but these are the three that I have. These are the three mainstays in the company: the V7, the M7, the P7. I can't recommend any of these more than I already am. If you have any questions, please ask away, and I'll share any insight that I can have for you. I've heard guys talk about, oh, the bridge is not great, the tuners are not great, my busted, my this went out. Guys, I've had these basses, the V7 for over 2 years now, the M7 for over a year, and the P7 for about 3 months. Never a problem on any of them. My preamps never went out, my tuners never broke, my bridges never busted, I've never had a string break on the saddle, nothing. Sometimes things are gonna happen, guys. You're gonna get lemons, whatever, or just, 1 out of 1,000 that they make, if they even make that many. It's gonna happen. But for me personally, and I've toured all over the world with these basses, never had an issue. I've gone from 100 degrees in LA up to 40 degrees in Canada recently with this bass and the V7. No problems. The neck did not move. Nothing. In fact, I can tell you for a fact, the V7 neck has not budged in over 2 years since I got it. The truss rod has not had to be adjusted in over 2 years. Do you have another bass you can say about that? Probably not. Anyways, I'm going to get going here. It's EddieStevensMusic.com. It's Eddie, E-D-D-I-E, Stevens, S-T-E-P-H-E-N-S, music.com. If you want to check it out. And I have a couple of trippy bands I play around town with. Great basses, guys. Get on it. This is signing out from Whittier, your boy Eddie.